Tonight, we are graced by having Liz Krane from Learn to Code LA talk to us about how to build communities. So without further ado, thank you, and
thank you.
The room is yours.
Just need to get set up. Hey guys, wow, thanks for having me here. I know a few of you, not all of you yet. I think I saw a lot of you at Scale though. It was my first year going, so really cool to make it out here for the first time. I hope to be a regular. So yeah, my talk tonight is about building a community. This is the story of a meetup group I started about a year ago called Learn to Code LA. So I wanted to start by just being maybe possibly a little too honest that I have a little bit of imposter syndrome right now. I was definitely feeling like I am the last person who should be giving a talk about community building because I guess I kind of feel a little bit like this guy. I love this quote. The reason being that, well, I mean, you know, there's a couple differences between us, but building a community is all about creating a sense of belonging, a sense of connecting with people, and I've always felt like an outsider. I've never been very good at connecting with people, and so it's just interesting that somebody like me, who I always kind of thought of myself as a bit of a loner. So the idea of starting a group or running a group or even going to one in the first place was, if you told me a few years ago I'd be doing this, I would not believe you. I have a history of social anxiety. So just not to tell you my whole life story, but to give you a sense of it, I went through all of college actually without making a single friend. It's kind of odd. So, you know, cats. So how did somebody like me end up making a group? Oh, back. I like this. I love this poster. So how did somebody like me end up in the role of a community builder? I somehow went from having basically no friends to going out and socializing almost every night of the week and running one of the largest tech meetups in Los Angeles, which is even stranger considering I don't have a background in technology at all. And so I kind of just fell into this. Until very recently, I didn't feel like I was part of the tech community. I mean, now, especially after Scale, I definitely do. So a couple months ago, when Lan asked me to talk about how I started this meetup group, I didn't want to say yes, but I did. And I'm glad that I did, because in racking my brain over this over the last couple days and like just banging my head on the wall a lot, I kind of realized that I guess I have a couple things to share. I mean, so the issue that I have is whenever people ask me, how did Learn to Code LA get so big so fast, or like, what's your secret for success? I usually just say, I think I just got lucky. But obviously, there's a bit more to it than just luck. There was a lot of hard work too. So I figured I can't give you a recipe for success for building your own community. It does take some luck, but what was that? Consistency, yes. Yeah, that is definitely one of my points. And I'll get to that in a sec. What I can offer, at least, is just my personal story and a couple things I learned from this crazy adventure. And I'm hoping this will spark maybe a couple new ideas for all of you and hopefully a good discussion tonight. And I have a few extra raffle tickets that Lan is holding for me. So if you participate, you'll get extra chances to win free stuff. That's always good. All right. Actually, this mic thing is kind of annoying me. So, oh, there's no off button. Can you guys hear me okay if I don't use the mic? Yes. Okay, that's much easier. Okay, I'm not used to this. All right, let's do it this way. Okay, so now I'm going to start my actual talk now. Okay. So if there's one thing that I want you guys to remember, if there's one point that I want to make today, it's just this. there's no reason not to start something, even if you don't know what you're doing. You can still make something valuable. And you don't need to be an expert. This is the main thing that I've learned. You kind of just need to learn as you go along. So quick show of hands, how many of you guys work in tech? Everybody, okay. I'm in the right place. If anyone's hiring, we'll talk later. Anyway, cool. So in technology, I've yet to actually work in tech myself, but you'll tell me if I'm right about this. The sense I get is that your expertise is what helps you bring value to your team, that the better you are at solving a problem or building things that work, coming up with new ideas, that is what creates value because of your experience and your knowledge. But when it comes to community building, I don't think the value is in expertise at all. And this might seem kind of counterintuitive. And certainly anytime I talk to somebody about building communities or any of the things that I've been doing lately, people assume that I must have a lot of experience doing it, or that they need to figure out a lot of things before they can start. And not true. Not true at all. So I often reach out to members in my meetup group, and I try to get more people to host their own study groups, their own events, things like this, or small things. And what I always hear from people is, oh, no, like, I can't, no, like, I'm a beginner. I can't teach anything yet. Like, I want to attend, like, hey, how about we do something about Java or robotics or game development? And I'm like, yeah, why don't you host it? I'll help you. Doesn't happen. And that just like, ugh, like I take a deep breath and I usually try to answer, calmly, like, it's okay. You don't have to be an expert to help other people learn something. But it's very hard to get people to actually like really believe that. It certainly took me like the better part of the year to start believing it, even after doing it all this time. So that's why I say the value of a community is not in expertise. The value in a community is in connections, in the network itself. So actually, I think that is my favorite definition of community, this really vague term. I think a community is just a connection building machine. And if you ever need some sort of expert knowledge, you need an answer to a question, you can usually find that on the internet. You can read a book, go to a workshop, but books, workshops, websites are not themselves communities. They're very useful resources, but not a community. So a community is the thing, the engine that propels these connections, that help you find those resources, find the experts, make new connections with people, be motivated to seek out the knowledge in the first place. Okay, so community, yay, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And actually, I'm going to get my water real quick. Forgot about that. There's definitely more to a community than just this like warm, fuzzy feeling that we get if we say like, yay, we're all friends, we all love each other. That's not going to work. Okay. There is actually a real like quantifiable value, though, to a community, to these connections. In sociology and economics, they call it social capital. And good thing to Google, like lots of cool studies come up if you Google that. I'm kind of getting into sociology this week. Not only does social capital predict things like career advancement, actually it predicts it just as well as your educational background and your experience level. So like we don't have Rolodexes anymore, but back in the day, there were studies that concluded like the size of your Rolodex is the #1 indicator of success, more than knowledge, more than anything. And it's also a good predictor of happiness. So is actually the best predictor of happiness, according to lots and lots of research. The other interesting thing I found, like yesterday, is that it's also a predictor of your general just physical health. That people who are socially disconnected are actually 2 to 5 times more likely to die than people who are well connected. Some studies even found that the impact of joining a social group is comparable to the impact on your health of quitting smoking. Two good things to consider anyway. So as a community builder, our job is to create social capital, to create these connections with real value. So here are a couple of testimonials. One from my friend Ronald, who got his first internship and his first job because of connections at my meetup group. Now, I never actually set out to help people get jobs. I mean, that's awesome that it happened. But I didn't really do anything to make that happen. I didn't make the connection. It's just a natural side effect of being part of a community. So for me personally, it has not helped me get a job yet, although I have a good feeling it might in the future. But the main thing I got out of it is just friendship. And that's partly why I agreed to give this talk today, because starting my meetup group and joining others has fundamentally changed my life, changed who I am in the last year. So a little bit about my personal story, and I'm going to be kind of bouncing back and forth between the personal stuff and the more academic stuff. But this is a personal talk, ultimately. So I figured, why not just share what it is? So I mentioned I didn't really have any friends in college. My personal social network was basically this. I'm really, really close with my family. On good terms with my coworkers, but not friendly, not really friends, close friends with any of them. And then I have a bunch of internet friends, but I don't know if those count. I mean, I think they count, but that's, if you ask a psychologist, it's debatable whether or not that counts. The thing is, I didn't mind not having friends. I wasn't lonely. I guess I enjoy talking to people on the internet. I have lots of hobbies that I can do by myself. I like being alone for long stretches of time. It wasn't until 2014 that I realized I should probably have friends. And that was actually because my mom was diagnosed with cancer that year, and she passed away a few months later. So that was the year when I actually felt lonely, for the first time. And I wasn't used to that feeling. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just do something I loved on my own. I felt like this just sinking sense of isolation. And so that was also the year that I decided for the first time to try actively to make friends. I had never done that before. I just kind of fell into friendships with people who sat next to me at school, that sort of thing. But I never had to put effort into it. So as a single adult, done with college, living alone, where do you go to make friends? So I went to the internet, and I searched online for where do I go to make friends in person, and I ended up at meetup.com. Yeah, and if anyone from Meetup is listening to this, you can send me money if you want. It's okay, I'll take it. I have become the poster child for meetups over the last year, because everybody I meet, I tell them, oh my God, it's changed my life. It's the best thing ever. I have friends now. It's crazy. Believe it or not. So it's a good thing. I approve internet. So in August of 2014, I made a project out of this lack of friends issue. Every day for a month, I tried to go out and socialize and meet new people. And I went to these meetup groups. This is my calendar from August. You know what? Actually, it wasn't that bad. But I live downtown, so it's pretty central. Yes, this would have been much harder if I lived further out. This is a sampling of some of the meetups that I attended, a bit random. The Bitcoin meetup was actually one of my favorites, because I was so out of place. I was like, what's Bitcoin? They're like, oh, let me show you. The Spanish one was pretty fun, too. I didn't understand anything they said. Just forgot my Spanish. Anyway, So by the end of the month, I had not friends yet, but a couple, new acquaintances who I was friendly with. It was a good start. The main thing was that it started to actually feel normal to like go out at night and do stuff. That was the first time that felt normal to me. And I was able to go meet new people without feeling sick to my stomach, like violently ill. Like that used to be a normal thing for me. Now it's fine. I'm like little butterflies, but I'm good. So after this thing was done, I figured, okay, I guess the obvious next step to level up my social skills is not just go to meetups. I should start my own meetup. I need to bump it up a bit. I wasn't ready for that. A few months went by. I figured, I guess what I really thought was that I had to figure out my career issues first, and then like know who I am and whatever, and then figure out what topic I would make a meetup about. At the time, I wasn't in the right job. I knew that I did not want to keep working in PR and communications, even though like I have a degree in that. Didn't like it anymore. It wasn't challenging enough. And I'd always dabbled in programming a little bit, on and off, but never got very far with it. And none of my contacts knew anything about it. So anyway, I knew I wanted to do something completely different. But the problem was, basically, I had always been curious about software development, but I never considered it seriously as a career option for me. I just could never picture myself as an engineer. People at school just would never describe me as that. I don't look like an engineer. I don't have the right brain for it. I'm not good at math, whatever. It doesn't come naturally to me. Just assume that it's just not, not my thing. I'm just not the right kind of person for it, which is a ridiculous myth and a talk about unraveling all of those cultural and gender-based stereotypes. It's a whole other talk. Big issue there, of course. I'm not going to talk about that today, but that brings me back to my main point of this talk, which is that you should really just forget all that stuff, all those assumptions, doubts, and just do your thing. Just start. You just need to learn. That's the only way you get good at something. If you're not good at math, you have to practice. If you're not an engineering type person, you can just practice and become one. That's how anybody else does it. They just started practicing much earlier than I did, but that's all right. So on January 31st, 2015, I saw Meetup had a 50% discount. I'm like, oh, maybe I can afford that, okay. And so I started Meetup, and Learn to Code LA was born. It felt really good to just start a thing. I just had to like press a button. It's really easy. I didn't give him my credit card number, but pretty easy. And I realized that a Meetup group about programming would be the perfect way to conquer two of my goals at the same time. One, leveling up my social skills, and then two, learning about this scary new world of software development. And I figured, hey, I spent all this time practicing and I got better at the social thing. So if I start a group about something I know nothing about, at least it'll help me meet other people who want to learn it too, and we can learn together. And if I just tell people up front, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, they won't expect anything from me, so it's okay. I'm not pretending to be an expert. You can't be an imposter if you're telling people, hi, I'm an imposter, it's all right. So I did it. So far, so good. So I kind of think of it, this roller coaster of building a community in 3 stages. Not scientific at all, but stage 1, basically, this is my living room, by the way. This is how it started. So stage 1, making friends. Basically, when you start a brand new community, it is just you trying to make some new friends. That's basically all it is. It's too small to be anything more than that. So I started in my living room. Maybe 2 or 3 people showed up. I had food. Spent way too much money on food. Nobody ate it. First lesson, just tell them to bring the food. That's better. But I guess if I can take any credit at all for the success of Learn to Code LA, aside from luck, it's probably 2 factors. Factor number one, I was really, really, really desperate to make friends, really desperate, because I still didn't have any. I had a bunch of acquaintances from my meetup experiment, but none of them actually became friends. We just didn't have enough in common, I guess. But the good news is, if you want to start a community, you do not have to be a desperately lonely person to be successful at it. You don't have to do it. It's all right. It's not a prerequisite. The lesson from that, though, is if you can get into the mindset of a desperately lonely person, that primes you for reaching out to people in a way that you might not normally do. Because it's always awkward when you talk to a bunch of strangers. And you're hosting your first meetup and a bunch of people walk in and you don't know any of them and you have to do the, hi, nice to meet you, blah, 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 thanks for coming. And then you forget all their names and you have to, ask again. And then, there's a lot of awkwardness built into it. But, that's okay. The only thing you have to remember, really, is that people don't connect with a community, like a thing that you're doing. It's not like some weird entity that, there aren't really any special rules. People just connect with other people. So all you have to do is get to know each person one by one and actually try to make friends with them. And then you have a community. I mean, a small one, but that's how it starts. So that's the first ingredient. The second is, like my friend over here said, consistency. Yes, that is more important, probably. So my first meetup was a complete disaster. The picture I showed you was actually like the third one. The first one was so bad. I did not take any pictures. There were like 3 of us sitting there in my living room very awkwardly. I didn't have any food. Nobody brought any food. We had nothing to do. I didn't know what to say or what to talk about. I didn't have an agenda. Like, so, like, you want to learn about coding? Cool. Me too. Yeah, okay. They're like, what have you built? I'm like, I don't know. It was just, yeah, it was pretty bad. The worst part was that morning I also had a panic attack, like a massive panic attack, like just hyperventilating. I thought I was going to pass out. And I basically just had to resign myself to the idea that I would have to do this every week, no matter what, and just suffer through it, and that maybe it would get better. But I think I told myself I would do it for at least 2 months, and then if nothing happened, then I would just give up. But I would have to do it every week for that long, and then see what would happen. So it got a little bit easier, slowly. I got better at hosting the events. People started to get to know each other a little bit. I started to remember people's names. We got, some people to help out gradually. I had the beginning of a couple new friendships. And somehow, gradually, without me even really noticing it, I stopped having panic attacks. I think it took about 6 weeks or so, and then they stopped. And I was still really nervous every morning. I did these on Saturdays. Every Saturday was just like death. Just like when I get out of bed, I'm like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. But I didn't have a panic attack for real. And then somehow I ended up doing this. This was week 8, I think. I taught a workshop. Thanks to the networking thing and asking people for help, we found a couple venues to host us for free, which was pretty cool. And that was probably the first time in my life I realized that asking for help actually works. And I was never in the habit of doing that. I was always pretty stubborn and independent, and I could usually figure stuff out on my own. I didn't really need any help. But when you are in a community, asking for help is kind of a way of showing people that you want to connect. And it doesn't even matter if you need the help. Like, just the act of asking for something shows that, hey, I trust you, and I want to rely on you for something, and I want us to do something together. It helps also if you're specific. So that is one of the lessons I learned. Be really specific about what you need help with. Don't just say, hey, want to help me with my meetup? You have to say, like, do you have a venue? Do you know someone who has an office that we can use? Do you know someone who can teach a class? Can you give me some money? I don't know. You have to be specific, though. And offer to help other people, too. It has to go both ways. I found my first co-organizer by asking him how I could help him with his goals. And he wanted to get into software development, too. He already worked in IT, but not in development. And being involved in the meetup, he wanted more teaching experience. And he wanted a way to stay motivated to learn Python. And through the meetup, he did that. And 2 or 3 months later, he got a really awesome job. And then he left the meetup. So I haven't really seen him since. But good for him. I mean, you know, it turned out great. And I've had other people help since then. But it started basically with me just sitting down with him and saying, like, how can I help you? There's got to be some overlap between what we're both trying to do. So you just have to ask. The other thing is you have to meet the other organizers. Show of hands, how many people here are organizers or community builders? Okay, or have been. Cool, okay, a lot of us. So I bet that's probably the reason why you're here tonight. Like, you want to meet each other. I'm sure you don't all know each other just yet. And like, that's why I wanted to do this talk too, as an excuse to meet more of you guys and see what everyone's up to. So there's a huge value in that, not just, you know, in making that connection with the person and getting access to what they know and their experience. But when you make a connection with an organizer, you also get access to their whole network. So it's kind of like a 200 for 1 deal or something. It's just efficient. It's more efficient that way. You know, and if we work together, we can cross-pollinate all the ideas, help make events, venues scale. I'm sure scale would not happen if the organizers were not friends also. I know you guys are all pretty close, which is great. I've found scale is super inspiring. So the next obvious step is sort of stage 2 of a meetup is connecting your new friends to each other. So when you start, it might look kind of like this. You're kind of the center of your new community. You met a lot of people. Maybe you became friends with a couple of them. In any case, you have to remember all their names and stuff. But the real value comes from introducing them to each other. So dense social connections are what create the most value, the most potential for new ideas, access to resources, right? This creates a sense of belonging if everybody knows everybody in your circle. And dense social connections create honesty. So this is why we have the concept of reputation arises from this. The value of a good reputation in a densely connected social network outweighs any value you would get from lying or cheating or stealing. So that keeps us honest, because there's more value to being honest, being a good person. It comes down to reciprocity. The greater the density of your community's connections, the more likely it is that people will reciprocate when you do something good, when you're helpful. So I like this term, generalized reciprocity. I'll do this for you without expecting anything back, in the confident expectation that somebody else will help me later. I love this term. I love this definition. Communities and trust, reputation, all those good things. There was a quote by this philosopher, Michael Taylor, that I really liked, and he said more or less that all of that good stuff relies on a balance, a really delicate balance between short-term altruism and long-term selfishness. You always need a bit of both. It just works better that way. And I really like this book and this quote. Communities work, they're great because they are actually just more efficient. I love this metaphor of relating it to why money is better than bartering, right? Maybe money's kind of dirty, but it serves a purpose. It makes our lives so much easier than if I had to trade this specific thing for that specific thing right now, or else no deal. So generalized reciprocity is like that. It gives us flexibility to be able to help each other in more ways over more time. And he ends by saying trustworthiness lubricates social life. I laughed out loud when I read that. This is a pretty dry book, so that caught me off guard. It was funny. It's true, though. It's absolutely true. You need that. It's kind of the glue for your community. Speaking of which, I found this book the same day that my meetup group went bowling for the first time. This is after one of our meetups, so I was just like, I had the book with me, and I was showing everyone, like, yeah, we're not doing this. We're not bowling alone, we're bowling together. Like, yeah, I have friends, yeah. Look at me being social, okay. Aside from having fun bowling and stuff, one of the points I wanted to make about this was our job as a community builder is basically to provide social lubrication. That's our job, which is required to build up trust, build up that reciprocity. But this is the fun part. Like that's why it's fun to make a community, because the most efficient way to create that trust and those social bonds is through informal, fun things that you do together. It's the best way to accomplish that. So we have lots of more formal meetings too, but afterwards, we usually do something fun, like little social lubrication, and Octocat stickers, of course, at all the meetups. Learning to have fun was kind of a lot of work. Before the meetup, I never used to drink beer, never used to go to bars, never stayed up late. I do those things now because it's part of my job. Sometimes it's fun too, yeah. Sometimes it's fun too. So I do a lot of workshops. I put a lot of work into the workshops, planning them, finding other people to help teach. But afterwards, we have sometimes maybe even more value from just going out for food down the street and talking. I think this is actually more valuable to people than the workshop. But maybe that's because I don't have that much to teach yet. In any case, it's all good. You need some of both, informal and formal. So the last stage of my community saga is where my meetup is at right now. It's gotten pretty big. If you're lucky, you've made a bunch of new friends. You've introduced them all to each other. You have a real community now. Maybe it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you're at the end game. You have a flourishing community, but that brings a whole new set of challenges. And this is the part where it actually gets kind of hard. I feel like all the other stuff is easy if you have a lot of time to put into it. And it'll just kind of take care of itself. But at a certain point, it doesn't really just take care of itself anymore. So as of today, Learn to Code LA has a little over 2,400 members. Our meetups are usually at maximum capacity. Our workshops usually get about 30 RCPs and another 30 on the waiting list. And that's great. I mean, that is awesome. Right? It makes it look like, wow, huge success. How'd you do that? You must have some secret sauce or something. It is great, but the challenge now is how to manage it at a large scale. So it is getting a little unwieldy. The implicit goal of any community is to reach maximum density of these connections, extracting as much social capital as you can. Right? Creating as much value as you can. But this goal is just inherently unattainable because we're humans. We have human limits. In the words of Clay Shirky, who also really awesome guy, look him up sometime, intimacy just doesn't scale. Just doesn't. Lots of things do, not this. When people talk about networks, both value of networks and limitations of networks, they cite a lot of this guy's work. He talks a lot about open source stuff too, some really good articles and talks and books. But people also talk about this law. Who's familiar with this already? Oh, okay, cool. This is new to me. I found it really useful to just think about this. So just a couple more people in your network makes many, many, many more connections. 2 people, 1 connection, right? 5 people, 10 connections. 12 people, 66 connections. So the complexity grows faster than the community. And that's great, right? More potential for value, more potential for resources and ideas and all that good stuff, the goal of a community. But at the same time, because we're humans, we can only manage so many friendships at a time. We can only remember so many names and faces. That's challenging enough as it is. Imagine managing all of these friendships where you have to think about their kids and their wives and their husbands and their dogs and remember what they did that weekend, and remember to ask them how they're doing and check up on them and all of that, making time to meet with them every so often to go out for drinks or lunch. You can only do that with so many people. So more connections means that it is just that much harder to reach a consensus, especially. Like if you're watching Netflix, it's hard to decide what to watch. It's a lot harder to decide if you're watching with a friend, and it's like just impossible if you have 3 friends or more, right? If the groups are going to work together, you have a big problem if it turns into this, right? So you can have a large community, you can have a densely connected community, but you can't have both. So there's a good article about this by Duncan Watts and Steven Strogatz, who definitely follow them on Twitter. They're both awesome. This paper, really cool. I don't understand any of it. I tried to read it. But the gist of it is, from what I do understand, they wrote a paper about what they call small world networks. So they came up with a mathematical model that basically explains why in a world with billions of humans, it's still somehow not that uncommon for us to use the phrase small world. It's like, oh, small world, funny running into you here, or funny that we know the same person. That happens a lot, even though there's so many of us. How is that possible? So what they found basically was that instead of this here on the left, like everybody trying to know everybody, which is impossible, most networks end up turning into something more like on the right, where you have kind of the best of both worlds. You have loosely connected small groups. Within that group, like your inner circle, you're really, really connected. You all know each other. But a couple of you also know people from another densely connected group. And that's how you get access to the wider network. And news can filter down from one to the next without everybody knowing everybody and having to put in all that work of remembering names and all that stuff. So communities naturally grow into this pattern. But a little work pushing it that way is helpful too. And that's mostly my job right now with my meetup group, is I am putting more and more of my time into trying to create the right connections and find people who can be like the center of their own densely connected group that can still report back to the rest of us. So we're still connected somehow, but I don't need to know everybody's names because I can't remember any more names. I'm at my limit at this point. So we have a few different communities based on topics, based on communication channels. We use Slack a lot, we use email, a little bit of GitHub, a little bit of Twitter. People who attend the workshops know each other really well. We have another separate group of people who never attend the workshops, but they know each other pretty well too because they're always on Slack, and different groups. So what is next for Learn to Code LA? I don't really know. Your guess is as good as mine here. For community, 1 year is really, really young. This is a baby, an infant. So I don't know what's going to happen next. Either we'll find new leadership, right? We'll have a good kind of small world network going, and the value will maintain itself. Or it might become unsustainable. I might have to move across the country, and then it'll probably die. That's what happens to most organizations eventually. They don't live forever, just like any organism. So my story, unfortunately, ends with a cliffhanger. It's a little anticlimactic, sorry. But I figured this would be a good point to just jump right into. I want to hear your stories. And so thank you all so much for listening.